and he's 35, 40 yards, but my scope is turned up on full power. So all I can see is hair, and I'm so freaked out that I just kind of start unloading bullets. Like I wish I had a less graphic way to say it, but I did. I wound up shooting 7 times, hitting the deer 5. There was no chance he was ever going to go anywhere, but I was like so freaked out and excited and insane that, yeah, that's what happened. That was my very first deer, but it was this incredible, very mature 6.5-year-old whitetail that kind of lives in legend where I'm from when I was a 13-year-old kid.
Big Buck Registry's deer hunting podcast, powered by Advanced Takedown Tree Stands, episode number 210. Brandon Bates, Breadcrumb, Bluetooth Nocks, PBR, and RMEF Team Elk. Please support our sponsors as they make this show possible. Today's show is sponsored by Advanced Takedown Tree Stands, the Horny Buck Seed Company, Covert Scouting Cameras, and Morris's Sporting Goods. Big Buck Registry is a virtual museum of hunting stories. We preserve a piece of Americana by interviewing and recording hunters about their hunts and experiences from across the country. And who knows, maybe we'll learn a thing or two along the way that'll help us take our hunt to the next level.
Hey, this is Adam Hayes from Team 200 and themoonguide.com, and you're about to push play on one of my favorite podcasts, Big Buck Registry.
Hi, my name is Joe Donito. I'm one of the Adirondack trackers at adktrackers.com, and you're about to listen to my favorite podcast, Big Buck Registry.
This is John Eberhardt. I've been hunting out of a saddle since 1981. I'm about to listen to my favorite podcast, Big Buck Registry, deer hunting podcast.
Hello, fellow predators. My name is Jay, and for Dusty Phillips and Jim Keller and the entire staff here at the Big Buck Registry, I'd like to say welcome to Big Buck Registry headquarters. I'm sitting here in the podcast studio spooling up another interview for you this week, and this week's guest is very interesting. His name is Brandon Bates, and he's one of the co-owners of the Breadcrumb company that made that Bluetooth trackable nock video that you may have seen. And we're going to get into his entire story. He's actually a very interesting person. He's a hardcore hunter, diehard conservationist, but also is an entrepreneur. So we're going to get into all that in just a second. But we do have a couple of housekeeping items. One is the podcast awards. If you would, please go to bigbuckregistry.com/podcast awards. And you'll have the opportunity to nominate this show for the fan favorite podcast of the year. And we're looking for some support. So if you like the show, please go over there. Also, if you like this show and you are an iTunes user, if you have an Apple iPhone and you're listening to the show on the podcast app, would you please leave us a review? We know there are a lot of podcast listeners out there, and we know there are a lot of iTunes users out there, but we'd like to see some more reviews so we can curtail our content as you would like to see it. Also, we're still running the harness program. We are out of harnesses. We do have a few people that have written in and said that they need some. So if you have a harness that came in a tree stand that you just got and you're not going to use that harness, please email me, jay@bigbuckregistry.com, and we'll give you some instructions on how you can either get that harness to that person or you can send it to us and we'll send it out. So you've probably seen that video, the one with the Bluetooth trackable nock. The invention featured in that video leaves you saying, why didn't I think of that? Brandon Bates, the arena voice of the professional bull riders and host of RMEF Team Elk on the Outdoor Channel, is also co-owner of Breadcrumb, the company behind the Bluetooth trackable nock technology. It takes more than a good idea to bring a product to market. It takes money, patience, time, and a good plan. Brandon, who says he prefers to stay out of the spotlight, is a television show host, a PBR arena announcer, has spent many hours hunting the West with the likes of Cam Haines, but is also an adventurous entrepreneur, hardcore hunter, and diehard conservationist. Brandon's going to share his story in just a moment, but before we get there, let's turn to Jim Keller with the Deer News.
For the Big Buck Registry, this is Jim Keller with the Deer News. Our first story this week, suspicious deer discovered in Elk County, Pennsylvania. This story was originally featured on the Gant News website. The Pennsylvania Game Commission today announced 2 free-ranging deer were euthanized on the evening of July 26 in Ridgeway Township in Elk County. The deer were discovered about 20 miles north of Disease Management Area 3 within the Commonwealth's elk management area. Both deer had identification tags in their ears indicating they were at one time part of a captive herd. The Department of Agriculture manages deer farming operations in the Commonwealth. The Commission has launched an investigation and will work with the Department of Agriculture to determine ownership of these deer and to ascertain whether they escaped a facility or were intentionally released into the wild. The deer are currently being examined by the Commission's wildlife veterinarian, who will conduct an initial test to determine whether either deer was infected with chronic wasting disease, said Wayne LaRoche, the Commission's special assistant for CWD response. The discovery of deer from a captive herd in the wild raises significant concerns as the Commission attempts to combat the expansion of CWD. This is disturbing news following the discovery of a CWD-positive wild deer earlier this month in DMA3, LaRoche said. With the Department of Agriculture's assistance, we will do all in our power to sort out what happened quickly and take appropriate action. If you have seen these deer in recent days or know from where they might have been originated, please contact the Game Commission's North Central office at 570-398-4744 or 570-398-4745. New law allows urban deer taking, donating venison to food banks. This story was originally featured on the Ashland Daily Tidings website and was reported by John Darling. While the Oregon State Legislature has passed a bill to set up a 12-year pilot program for the taking or euthanizing of excess urban deer, Ashland, Oregon Mayor John Stromberg says such an action doesn't work and the city isn't going to do it. Governor Kate Brown signed Senate Bill 373, which requires the State Fish and Wildlife Commission to adopt a pilot program for urban deer population control into law on June 14th, after it passed both the House and Senate by overwhelming margins. It takes effect January 1st. Ashland's urban deer population has been a hugely controversial situation in Oregon, with some people saying deer were here first and should be allowed the right to live, and others reporting deer attacks during fawn season are running and wanting protection. The new law doesn't tell cities to do anything, but simply opens a door for cities to petition the Oregon State Department of Wildlife and Fish for permission to humanely kill deer without darts or chemicals so the meat can be donated to food banks. This law is not for some kind of free-for-all, Representative Pam Marsh says. Statewide ODFW would make it closely structured and would monitor this pilot program and report back as to what kinds of rules are necessary. It's all very preliminary. It raises the question of how you corner deer so it's not an issue to people. It would have to be organized in a way that people can accept it, and I don't know if that can be done. Fawns collared as part of 5-year CWD study. This story was originally featured on the Wisconsin Public Radio website and was written by Danielle Kading. The Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources finished collaring fawns last month in southwestern Wisconsin. Researchers have been collaring deer and other predators as part of a 5-year study on chronic wasting disease. The DNR collared 91 fawns during May and June to track their survival, said Dan Storm, elk and deer research scientist with the DNR. The study began last fall, and researchers collared 138 adult deer over the winter. Storm said the collars measure the weight, sex, and age of the animals, as well as biopsy deer to see whether they have CWD. Researchers then follow them through time to look at their survival outcomes, movement, and habitat use. A dozen deer tested positive for CWD out of 122 that were sampled over the winter. That's not too out of line with what we expected. That's about 10% of our sample, so that's certainly not surprising, Storm said. He said the study is the first of its kind to examine deer mortality in a herd with CWD in the Midwest. The study covers parts of Iowa, Dane, and Grant counties that have both a high and low prevalence of CWD. Storm said they plan to collar 30 bobcats and coyotes this fall. Predators kill deer, especially newborn deer, he said. Even though the impetus of the project is to look at chronic wasting disease, we're trying to look at the deer population holistically and look at all the major potential factors that may affect deer populations. Storm said researchers aim to catch and collar 200 deer this winter. An update on the study will be presented to the Natural Resources Board at its August meeting. That concludes this week's edition of the Big Buck Registry Deer News. For links to the stories featured this week, please check our show notes at www.bigbuckregistry.com. If you have any ideas for future topics or have any questions about any of these topics, please email me at jim@bigbuckregistry.com. For the Big Buck Registry, this is Jim Keller with the Deer News.
Well, thanks to Jim Keller with the Deer News. Without further ado, here is Brandon Bates. Brandon Bates, welcome to the Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast. How are you, my friend?
I'm good, man. I'm really good. Really busy.
Yeah.
With some of this new stuff we'll talk about later. But yeah, I'm fantastic.
It seems like you're busy. I know. I think you have another something to do right after this, so we'll try to get through as much content as we can in an hour.
Yeah, no, it's a good busy. I think there's so many hunters, people out there, and guys like me that are just normal guys that, we want to work in the outdoor space, and we want to create something, or create a space, or create a podcast, like for you, example, anything that kind of keeps us connected and tied to the outdoors. So that's what's consuming me right now. So that's a really good thing.
Isn't it an interesting dynamic when you're trying to stay connected to the digital world, because that's where the world is these days as far as communications are concerned, and your raw roots of just liking to get outside and get away from everything? Isn't it an interesting pull in two different directions?
It's a very interesting pull. In fact, like right before we came on, you and I were having a brief conversation, and I just told you, I was like, I'm really envious of your podcast, because I've always wanted to do that, but I've just never had the commitment, and I just don't know that I'm smart enough, and that I don't have the time and whatnot. And you and I, we haven't really talked too much about background, but so I've been the voice and announcer of the Professional Bull Riders Tour for 15 years.
Is that right? No kidding.
Yeah. So I announced my first PBR event whenever I was 22, and I'm 38 now, and so they just kind of hooked it up, and that's been my job for that many years.
So you're the guy that's doing the calling during the event?
Yeah, the live announcer. So when, one of our biggest events too, we used to be Worcester, Mass.
Sure.
I don't know if you've ever been to that event or not.
I've never been to the event. I know where Worcester, Mass is. It's very close to my hometown, and relatively speaking, it's an hour and 20 minutes away. But I know exactly.
Well, everything up there is kind of like not too far away. You know what I mean? Like it's right. So that's why I referenced it. But but I've been the voice of the PBR for so long, so I've had a great platform. I felt like to do a podcast or do something like that, and I just can't. I don't know, man. Like I'm just not good enough. Maybe I'm too cynical.
I think you're just fine. I think you'd be very good at it. But as you mentioned, there is a time commitment that nobody's prepared for. So
that's right.
You said that I was intelligent. That's questionable. But it's the intelligence part. I think you got to figure some stuff out. But definitely the time commitment that's the hard part.
But yeah, no, it's being in the outdoor space, man. It's really good, and I'm happy over here. Growing up in Louisiana, that kind of had this affinity for rodeo. Like I loved it, and I wanted to. I should say infatuation. I think infatuation would be the proper word, but I pursued that as a young teenager and rode bulls and was terrible at it. I literally rode bulls because I don't know. Like I was just, I wanted to do that as a kid, and found out by the time I was in my later teens that it was just awful. It was the scariest thing you could ever do. But by that time I was like so ingrained in it that I wound up, and I had this knack for being an announcer, and I started calling like my high school football games and basketball games and things like that. And I was really doing that just to kind of get out of class. But anyway, it kind of spilled over, and I was like, all right, you hate riding bulls. You're terrible at it, but you're really good at that kind of man voice. Why don't you do that? So I picked that up, and the rest was kind of history. I grew up in Louisiana, transferred to Oklahoma by the time I was a junior in high school. And then the rodeo thing kind of took off from there. Through my years as an Oklahoman, I really, really focused a lot on deer and duck hunting. I mean, deer, duck, and turkey hunting. I would say turkey hunting was probably how I really got hooked as a young kid.
Sure. I mean, that's
because it's warm and it's
fantastic, isn't it?
Yeah, you got to worry about snakes, but that's,
right.
And then, like if you don't duck hunt and you're from Louisiana, they kind of banish you from ever being able to say you're from Louisiana. So I kind of had to pick that up. There was a while there, I think I duck hunted, 60, 65 days a year.
Right.
I was also broke. I didn't really have a job at that time too. I wasn't exactly Willie Robertson. So yeah, and then the deer hunting thing, like I just turned and consumed myself with hunting, and I was really fortunate to have a family that helped me do that. I had a grandfather that put together some tracts of land in southern Oklahoma. So by the time I was a kid in high school, I had a little bit of a silver spoon. My grandfather wasn't rich by any means. He worked his butt off and was a dirt poor farmer his whole life, but had put together these little tracts of land. Yeah. And by the time I was in high school, he's still a dirt poor farmer living off of a Social Security check and a retirement check from working in a plant. But we had a couple thousand acres to manage and cultivate. And he killed deer whenever he was a kid. He killed deer when he was a kid to feed his family.
Right.
He's passed away now, so I can tell this, but and I'm certainly not condoning anyone breaking the law. But my grandfather used to kill deer year round to put food on the table. That was I don't remember him doing that when I was alive, but I remember my mom saying, just like, if we got hungry in July, we went and got a deer, so that was, so he had a different mentality of deer hunting than I did. And it was funny to kind of watch us clash as my grandfather was older, in his late 70s. And I'm in my, 16, 17. And I'm like, it's deer season, and it's, kind of a whack 'em and stack 'em mentality. And right. I'm like, no. I'm like, I'm like, just let him go. Let him go,
Right. Let him live.
But,
yeah.
Yeah. Let him live. And he came from an era where, it was funny because you'd think the mentality would be reversed, but, blue tongue had wiped out deer populations in that part of Oklahoma time and time again. And he remembered people in the 30s and 40s and 50s when they were, a time there were people starving, you know what I mean, in that part of the country. And,
absolutely.
He would say that, you may not see another deer. So if you do see one, you have to kill it. You know what I mean? That was his thing, because it wasn't about, we're worried about extinction here. He was worried about, the kids not eating.
Right. It's a classic question. We're all into conservation, and certainly that has come a long ways in this century and in last century. And we're trying to figure out what is the right methodology. And I think that brown and down thing was around for quite a while, and that probably led to a dwindling of deer populations. But at the same time, even today, if you're faced with the ultimate conservation efforts where you want to have a sustainable resource and keep it at full throttle as high as you can, that means letting deer pass. But if it comes down to feeding your family or the conservation effort, which one wins? I think feeding the family always wins.
Yeah, I mean, and God forbid, I hope that it never comes to that in this country again, because our North American model of conservation, I truly hope that people listening to your podcast understand and know what the North American model of conservation is. And if you don't, please go online, Google it, look at it. There's videos that I've done. There's videos that Shane Mahoney's done.
Mm-hmm.
He was a guy, I'm sure you're probably familiar with Shane Mahoney.
Not only are we familiar, but he has been a guest on this show.
Yeah, I mean, but what we have in this country right now is unprecedented. And we are the envy of the world when it comes to our conservation model. But let me flip, and I remember so one thing my senior English teacher told me, she said, you do realize that every time you say but, it takes away everything you just said. So remember that too, because she was very right. But if you know what hits the fan and we are fighting for our lives and we're in a full-on out World War III, then feeding the family comes number one.
I don't think we're ever going to get there. I really hope we don't get there, at least in our generation, our kids' generations, and whatever. I mean, but regardless, if we did ever get there, thank God for these past few generations for doing what they've done to get us game populations where they're at.
Right. Absolutely. It is a model, and it's something that we talk about an awful lot on this show, and that sustainable resource that hunters are an incredible part of. Without the hunters, we don't have the conservation efforts, and this is what the non-hunters don't understand, is that they think it just happens all no problem. If all hunters collapsed and we all gave up our licenses tomorrow, what happens to the population of game? My guess is it completely folds upon itself for various reasons.
Let me tell you, I've been to Brazil. I've been to other places in South America, and I've been to other countries around the world. And I bring up Brazil not to sound like a world traveler, but I went down there for some other work stuff, and I remember driving for 9 hours on a pretty incredible highway. No potholes, nice infrastructure. I like Brazil. And I remember driving with a buddy of mine and looking around on both sides of the road. I'm like, dude, I haven't seen an animal. He's like, oh, we don't have them. And I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, well, we don't really have, the hunting infrastructure and the laws that you guys have, and it was, you could just see it. It was I'm driving by the most incredible fields and crops and things and wooded areas and like this perfect habitat for any type of deer or stag or whatever.
Right.
And I never saw anything, and that's why. It's because it's not a big part of their culture. Now Argentina's different, but that, like, some parts of Brazil is a big country, but there's places like that where they don't have that type of infrastructure. And let me tell you, it just goes away. If you don't have it, it goes away. And like you said, you're right. Hunters are. And I know what you meant, but hunters aren't just a big part; they are the part. That's it. They're the line. That's where it stops.
Right.
And non-hunters can think whatever they want. They can say they're going to combat, they're going to battle. We're never going to win the argument in the sense of having an argument. We're just going to do what we do and put our nose to the ground and keep doing what we do and keep working to protect our game laws, support our conservation organizations, and that's how we're going to win this battle. Don't waste your time getting in a stupid pissing match with some uneducated person. I guess I'll say that.
Absolutely. That's a kind way to describe them.
Well, yeah, I just see all these battles on Facebook and people going crazy, and it's like don't do that. Like, there's just no sense in doing that. There's better ways to win, I guess is what I should say.
Right. Completely agree. So let's talk about some of your deer hunting, Brandon. You're clearly an outdoorsman, and being part of the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation.
Yeah, so I've been really fortunate for the past, I can't believe it's been 8 years. For the past 8 years, to work as a contractor for the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation. I guess my official title is the executive producer and host of Team Elk. When I first came on, it wasn't Team Elk. It was called the Elk Chronicles. It was on the Outdoor Channel. Cameron Haynes and I co-hosted it together, and then Cameron's kind of went on to blow up and be a big superstar.
Right.
And I, but that was good. That was great for Cameron in the sense of that, that's who Cameron was destined to be. I don't like the spotlight that much. Like, I like I'm serious. Right. And no knock to Cameron. Good for him. He's done it incredible. I don't like being out front that much. I like being out front enough to make it work for me and my family, but at the same time, I really love to push people and organizations forward. And I don't say that to sound like, I'm this, Robin Hood. I'm just saying it in the sense of, I really genuinely do like to help people, and I genuinely like to help, conservation organizations. I'm a member of a few, and I really, really enjoy that. So I host their TV show and have kind of been responsible for kind of coming in and revamping that show. It's now called Team Elk. It airs on the Outdoor Channel, and we also just launched the new network. It's the Elk Network. It's the elknetwork.org, and you can go to rmef.org as well to find it there. But it's where we host and we put up all of our previous TV content and stuff there. And what I did is I kind of revamped it to take the hosting role out of it. Like, you won't see me a ton. I don't come in and interject. We film hunts, and we film not just hunts where people kill stuff. You know, there's a lot of, when it's elk hunting, there's a lot of times you don't kill anything.
Sure, of course. Like,
there's a lot of times you get close.
Right, unless you're squirrel hunting, that's usually the case.
Yeah, squirrel hunting, there's a lot of stuff falling out of trees. But when you're elk hunting, you know, it's not it. Every show loves to say this, but I'm going to say it too. For us, it truly isn't about the kill. You know, if I kill one, I need to kill one elk a year to keep my freezer full. In fact, I just went through my freezer last week with my stepdad, and we took out about this remaining 50 pounds of hamburger that I had. I left 10 pounds in there to get me from now until hopefully mid-September, if I am fortunate enough to kill another one. And we made our final push, and we made beef sticks to kind of give to our friends and eat during hunting season and stuff like that. My family sustains off of one elk a year. I don't like killing multiple animals, even if I'm going to give it away or donate it to a homeless shelter or whatever. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. In fact, by all means, people, please keep doing that because they need it. But the reality is, in some of the places that I elk hunt, I don't have ready access to a homeless shelter or somewhere like that that's going to process and to be able to donate it to the appropriate place. So For me, I don't like to kill, 2-3 elk a year. I don't feel good about it. That's just me, I'm not putting down anyone else. I'm not talking about anyone else. I am literally just focusing on me and how I feel when it comes to elk hunting, because when I let that arrow go, it is a big, big deal. At times it's kind of a, drop you to your knees kind of a deal.
Right. Sure.
And that's what I feel like, when I let an arrow go, or if I'm rifle hunting, if I squeeze the trigger. And if I'm going to kill that second or third animal a year, I won't even say elk, just animal, it's because I got a buddy right sitting beside me that's typically running the camera, and he's saying, I really don't have any meat. You got the tag. Please, tag this animal and split it with me or help me or give it to me, or you know what I mean? Something in that type of situation is. So. Right.
And there's a lot of responsibility that goes along with that release of the arrow or the pull of the trigger. A ton. So
it's life or death. I mean, Like
right.
People can say whatever they want, but to me, it is. It's life or death. I think it's that big of a deal. And it may not be my life or my death, but it's that animal's life or death. And it's, I'm a pretty religious person, and I don't think God put that animal there in that moment for an accident.
Mm-hmm.
I don't, and I think it's my responsibility to handle it ethically.
I agree. I think ethics and respect, and that's a gift. That's a gift that was given to you. And if you don't respect that whole aspect of it, you're in the wrong game. You should never be here. But there seems to be a progression, I think, in life. As a younger person, I was obsessed with just the kill, and that's what I wanted. I wanted to have that under my belt, and then I was obsessed with the better kill. And as I've matured, I'm realizing that I'm almost obsessed with the hunt. I'm not as obsessed with the kill anymore whatsoever. And it has to be a special moment, and all of them are special, but now more than ever, I don't know, maybe I'm just getting too old, but there seems to be this maturity factor that I think you start to understand that in all of life a little bit better than you did when you were in your teens, about how precious that moment is and how precious that animal is.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I didn't understand it at all. Whenever I was in my teens, I had no idea. But man, as I get older, and it certainly becomes, a big deal, and certainly really, takes on a whole different meaning. And I don't know, I hear people say this a lot now. It's a popular thing to talk about, but
I really pride myself now in the older fact of knowing that when my family's eating meat, good, bad, or indifferent, I was man enough to throw the bullet and watch it die. I'm not running. Look, we still buy steaks from the grocery store sometimes. You know what I mean? I'm not telling you that I don't eat any type of beef, or I don't ever buy a hamburger at a restaurant, or anything like that. But for the majority, I love that hunter and gatherer mentality of knowing that I'm going out for hunting season and I'm bringing back meat to last the family for a year. And my wife appreciates it. My kids appreciate it. It's a super special thing.
I completely agree. And it's an ultimate when you know that you had this full experience, this hunter-gatherer mentality, and I have a hard time understanding people criticizing our methodologies and our way of life when they've never done that themselves. If they've tried it and dislike it, that's fine. But to say that our lifestyle is worse or not acceptable is just completely out of place.
You're right, but I'm going to say something that could draw some criticism here. I'm going to go and I know Shane Mahoney, so I'm going to go a little Shane Mahoney on you for a second. We've done it to ourselves. We've done it to ourselves because we plaster these pictures of these dead animals with tongues hanging out and arrows sticking through them and blood running down their side, and we push them on social media like it's like we're some mid-century barbarian. I'm not talking bad about people but if you want people to view you as a respectable, caring, loving person that cares about the animals they pursue, and we all do, regardless of our trophy shots. And hey, guess what, folks? I take trophy pictures too. I have in the past. Mm-hmm. I'm a part of that. So when I say we've done it to ourselves, I'm jumping in the pool with you. But at some point in time, like if we're going to protect this way of life and if we're going to protect what we're doing, like we're going to have to think differently. And we're literally going to have to go to that space in that conversation about organic table fare and that conversation like we just had about the hunter and gatherer mentality. And it's going to have to stop being about the trophy so much. And that's, Shane gave a speech earlier this year, and I'm literally like just super in awe of that dude. Like he's such a visionary and understands, kind of conservation on a whole nother level. But I've gotten to the point now, specifically after really thinking about some of the things that he says and listening to some of that stuff, to where, man, he's right. Like, trophy hunting years and years and years and years ago was, about taking the biggest and the oldest male out of the herd because it was time for him to go. He wasn't doing any, he wasn't doing the health of that herd any good any longer.
Right.
That male typically meant he had the biggest set of antlers. He had the biggest body. He was the biggest and most robust. But he was beginning to decline in age, and you knew there was another generation that was going to come up and repopulate and make things bigger and better and pass on, genetics. That's what trophy hunting was. And now we've kind of turned it into this thing where it's, just trophy hunting. And I gotta tell you, I don't know. I'm really turning the way that I think about trophy hunting. Like I said, it's about the freezer for me.
Right. I'm okay with that. That sounds quite delicious, actually. Totally fine. So let's turn to a little bit about your deer hunting skills. And it sounds like you put a lot of thought into being out in the field. So I would imagine that if you're trying to fill your freezer, you must have some strategies on how to do this.
Oh man, when it comes to deer hunting, just like straight up whitetail hunting.
Yeah, if that's your preferred method, or maybe it varies. Maybe
no. I mean, I like mule deer. I would assume that probably 90+% of your listeners are probably whitetail hunters, and that's a great thing because whitetail hunters
Whitetail hunters keep our industry moving. There's no question about it.
It does. Although I'm very intrigued with the blacktail and then the hunting that's out west right now. That seems like that's a whole ball game we haven't really explored, and I'm very curious about it. So we'll have to. That's another podcast. But yes, yeah. I think whitetail kind of drives the industry.
Well, so the number one piece of advice that I think that or I don't, not that I'm necessarily giving advice, but the number one thing I could say that helps all whitetail hunters, and because it changed the way that I whitetail hunted, go on one elk hunt, even if it's a do-it-yourself, Colorado, Idaho, over-the-counter. I just named off 2 states really quick that have over-the-counter elk tags. Just go on one. Because what you learn from that experience will completely change the way, because you think whitetails can smell, and let me tell you, we all know that they can. Mm-hmm. But elk, the way elk smell, elk will bolt and run from you from 400, 500, 600 yards away if the wind shifts for a half a second. It will change the way that you approach the wind. I can't explain it. It will just really, really change and make you a insanely better whitetail hunter.
Interesting. Why do you say that?
I never understood the wind and the power of it, and how important it was until I went on my first elk hunt. I know that might sound silly, but it just did. In elk hunting and in western big game hunting made me feel like whitetail hunting wasn't as hard as I was making it. And the reason why is because, whitetails typically live in a pattern. They typically kind of have a home range, and they kind of live close to that home range for the most part. And specifically early season, you can really pattern them. You got your trail cams up. If that buck's hitting, a specific spot at, 5:30, 6 o'clock in the evening, an hour and a half before the sun's completely gone, and he's doing that every other day, pretty good chance that if you sit there 4 or 5 days, that's going to happen. When it comes to Western game, it's like you just took the house of cards and just threw it all over the floor, because you never know where any of these animals are going to be at any given time. I mean, you may see a bull one night on a ridge top and think, all right, that's the bull we're going to hunt in the morning. We're coming after him. We know he's there. He could be there, and there's a lot of times that guys that hunt elk will be like, yeah, they go back the next morning and they are able to make a move on that bull. Now, whether they are successful is probably about 3%. But there's also a really good chance that bull could be in another state. I mean, because once they start moving and they start walking and they're really getting after, they're gone. And your whole deal's blown up. So like when you start thinking about hunting an elk or a mule deer or whatever, deer are not as bad as elk, but your whole strategy could be gone in hours, and you're starting over from zero. You may have been watching this bull for a week and thinking, okay, he's there, I'm good. And then all of a sudden he sees you, catches wind, another public hunter catches wind, another public hunter comes in, whatever, something spooks him. And like literally gone. So that's what makes it so interesting.
Okay. Gotcha. So the emphasis on the wind that is brought when you go elk hunting is something, if you can take that lesson and turn it into your deer hunting, then you'll understand how much those animals use the wind.
You really, really will. And like there's a lot of, those deer hunters out there like the Drury's and Lee Wachowski and people like that, they understand how to kill big deer. Now they grow big deer, you know what I mean? And
Sure.
Let me tell you something. They work at it. They really, really work at it. I can't even get Lee on the phone during the 3 months of the summer because he's fertilizing, he's planting, he's disking, it's something. He's literally an impossible guy to talk to, those times a year, because he's working on growing big deer.
Sure. I think that the couple of times we've had him on the show here, he's always come in mid-show, coming out of the fields off of his tractor, and that's the way it is. You just have to expect that.
But they understand. They understand how to kill big deer.
What other techniques do you use to control your scent? Or maybe you don't. Maybe it's just purely wind. What other things have you picked up over the years that you use to put that in your advantage?
And you know what? Honestly, I hope I don't make anybody mad here or have any sponsors.
I'm not a big sin control guy.
Okay.
I just don't think you can control it. I think you can do some things to help knock it down, but I just don't know that you can control it. Not to the level that makes me feel comfortable. Now, look, I've never hunted with an ozonics. I've talked to some people that are really good friends of mine that love them, and they freak out about them. And they say they're the greatest thing since sliced bread. I've never been someone to be able to find anything that maybe I just stink. I don't know.
So you're not obsessed with it like half the country is what you're saying.
No, I'm not obsessed with it like half the country is. I think, pick the wind. If you have the option. Now look, not everybody has this option. I understand that. You know what I mean? There's those, there's our 9-to-5 weekend warriors that are hunting public land, and God bless you, because you really are the salt of what we do here, and you matter more than, it's one thing for all of us to be on TV or to be on the podcast or to be, on YouTube or, whatever, but that's not the majority of people out there hunting. The majority of people out there hunting are hunting public land, and they're grinding it out, and that's really cool. And my point getting to that is they may only have one set, but if you really want to try to fool a mature deer, and you have one set and the wind's blowing in the direction, that buck's bedding, and you've got trail cam pictures of him or whatever, don't try it, because you're just going to run him out of the country. That's probably one of my biggest strategies of anything is minimal in and out. Play the wind, use it to your advantage. If the wind is bad that day, just get out of there. I mean, pretty much any part of the country that we live in, we know where the dominant wind is going to be coming from during deer season. If you're in the South, pretty good chance that for most of your archery season or whatever, it's going to be coming, out of the South. If you're more northern, where those cold fronts have started to dip down, then your predominant wind may be coming out of the north at that point in time. Set your stands up according to that.
Right.
And when you have a bad wind, just don't do it. Watch football.
That's a good point. Whereas we say in the North, wait for the snow, then you're all good.
Yeah.
Right. So let's talk about some of your other adventures. You've specifically breadcrumbs. Are you more of an archer, or are you a gun hunter?
Man, I'm a hunter. I don't like to divide the two. And I really want to talk about my product, but I was trying to find this, and I wanted to bring this up. You asked me about what's one of my, and you may know this guy. I've never met him. I was trying to find this book in my office while you were asking me about deer hunting strategy. One of the books that changed my life in the way that I shouldn't say changed my life as a deer hunter, specifically as a whitetail hunter. Yeah. Was a book called Bow Hunting Whitetails. I think his name is Eberhard.
John Eberhard.
Bow Hunting Pressured Whitetails was actually the name of the book. And John was the one that wrote Bow Hunting Pressured Whitetails.
Ironically, I interviewed John yesterday.
Are you serious?
I swear to God.
That's so crazy. So, well, I would love to tell him, as a teenager, his book changed the way that I looked at whitetail hunting, and here's why. The reason that it did, and the reason that I'm telling, and I, like I said, I've never even met John, but the reason that book, and the reason that I think every whitetail hunter should read it, is because this is a guy that killed big bucks in a place that has more deer hunters per capita than any other state. And he absolutely would grind it out and get it done. And some of his methods were so unorthodox. I mean, he's using tree slings at 25 feet in the air, and talked about getting into his stand 2.5 hours before daylight, just to sit there and let things calm down. And what it came down to for me as I read that book, and I'm like, if you really want to be a big buck deer hunter, and you're after that the most mature buck on your property, which I agree you should be, you got to go the extra mile, got to grind it out, put in the work, because that's what it's going to take.
So true.
So that book, yeah. So the Bow Hunting Pressured Whitetails by John Eberhard was a book that if you want to change the way you think as a whitetail hunter, and if you're a public land do-it-yourself kind of whitetail hunter, that's the book. It's old. You got to read it though. Right. So
great.
So let's talk about
great advice. So let's. So we talked a little bit about how the social media aspects and being involved in the way the world works these days connect is the exact antithesis to us being or wanting to be in the woods and being as far away from that as we can. Yet there, it's like east meets west, north meets south kind of stuff. But there's always a meeting somewhere. And I think what you've done with this new technology that we're going to talk about in a second is kind of one of those things, and it's fascinating. So let's talk about breadcrumbs.
Yeah, so I just looked and saw what time it was, so don't worry. I'll just clock. I didn't realize we'd already been talking 45 minutes.
I know, it's crazy, isn't it? It goes so fast.
Yeah, I felt like we were still just in the warm-up.
Right. It feels like that.
My team of partners, fellow outdoorsmen, guys got together, and we really thought that there should be a way to help people find lost arrows, because we all lose arrows all the time, in tall grass, under the ground, or in our neighbor's pasture, or, whatever. I mean, we just, lose arrows all the time. And a buddy of mine were talking. In fact, we were on a hunt together, and he's like, what if we created this company and we really went after it, and we created a Bluetooth nock? And we're like, that sounds brilliant, and we knew that other people had thought about it, or we at least assumed. That was probably the biggest challenge for us for the 2 years that we went to engineering, developed and pooled our money together to make this happen, was that we just knew that there was no way that someone wasn't going to come out with this before we could. So I can't tell you how many Google searches I've done, like Bluetooth nock, Bluetooth nock, Bluetooth nock. And we obviously had our attorneys, and in fact, that's what cost our business so much money, was, our attorneys and our intellectual property process to make sure we were protected and all that stuff. But still, no one did. No one came out with it. And we were lucky enough to get far enough down the road in our engineering process. And here we are. We're kind of opened up for pre-sales, but we've created a Bluetooth trackable nock, and it's really designed to help people find their arrow. I don't want people, and people will, or I shouldn't put them in that box, but I think people will think that this is an animal tracker, or that we built something to help you specifically find your animal. Number one, the arrow rarely stays in, or the nock rather rarely stays in. You may lodge a broadhead or something, but that part of the arrow shaft will typically break off. And I want you to be able to find that part of the arrow that broke off, because if you can do that, then that gives you your first big corner piece of the puzzle to being able to put the rest of the puzzle together.
Right.
You may be off of a blood trail. You may not, but this nock and this ability for you to find your arrow can put you back on the blood trail, or at least put you in the area where that animal was. But honestly, 95%, that's a 5% scenario. 95% of the time, this is going to keep you from losing your arrows when you're practicing, or when you're at a 3D shoot, or when you do decide to have enough confidence to take a 100-yard shot for practice purposes only.
Right.
Because I practice at that range all the time, just so I don't have to, freak out and have this crazy anticipation over a 30 or 40-yard shot. But when I'm practicing at 100 yards, I miss, right. and sure. When I miss, I want my arrows back.
Right.
So that's the 95% of what this product is. It's I think the ATA said there's 9 million archers in America. It's a lot of lost arrows. As technology advances, I felt like we should have been able to create something by now that helps people not lose all of those arrows.
Right.
That's the Breadcrumb. So the company's Breadcrumb. It's the Breadcrumb LLC. The website's breadcrumbtech.com. And we have a number of products. We have 2 available for pre-sale right now, because we're right at the finish line. We didn't want to do a traditional Kickstarter in a sense. We knew we were close enough to the finish line. Once we got to about that 90-day window, we knew we were going to be able to ship late fall, winter of 2017, this year. We knew we were going to be able to ship in the late fall, winter of this year. So that's kind of, once we got to that point, that's when we're like, all right, we're good enough to now offer these for pre-sale, which would help us get a full database on our customer and our consumer and the demand. So that's why we did it that way, which is a little unconventional in the outdoor space. In the technology space, in the world of Kickstarter, there's 10,000 Kickstarters starting every day that do it this way. But in the outdoor space, it's a little unconventional, but we're offering, we set a super limited quantity for the first, or we call early adopters. And they're getting very close to being sold out, but we set them at 40% off.
Okay.
And then once that happens, they'll go to 25% off, and then they'll be at full retail once the first orders begin to ship.
Gotcha. Okay. So
if you want one, now is a really good time. I can promise you, because once they're done, I looked today and there was like 30, 31, 35 6-packs left and like 73 packs left, and then there's about 400 of the single Nocks that were still available at 40% off. But if you want to get them, now's a really good time. But
gotcha.
I don't even know that that's the coolest product. But we have another product that's really cool too. But in the past 48 hours, this thing, have you seen the viral video that kind of went around? I'm assuming that may be how you and I originally got hooked up.
Of the Bluetooth Nock?
Yeah.
Yes. In fact, my wife shared it with me. That's how she discovered it. I said, this is cool. I said, I'm calling these guys right now.
So there was a guy who's got a Facebook page called I Love to Hunt. Nice guy. Right. I wound up reaching out to him. You may know, I don't know, you may know that page, but he kind of condenses it and gets it to more like 30 seconds or something like that in his version of it. He posted on his Facebook page. It's got like 170,000 likes or something like that. I mean, so, medium, like, nice page. And he sends me a direct message and says, hey, I just posted your video and you had 300 shares in 10 minutes. He's like, you better hang on. And I'm like, okay, that's cool, great, awesome, whatever. Well, in 36 hours now 36 hours later, it's about to eclipse 7 million views and 147,000 shares currently. Wow. So it's just been all of a sudden, it's like, we felt like we had a really good idea that would help the everyday archer. But I don't know that we really thought that it would do this. So super excited about it. I really do think that it's going to be a great tool for archers to use and to be able to recover their arrows. And like I said, give you the opportunity to recover your animal once it gets you back on that blood trail. Am I going to tell you that there's not going to be the oddball situation where you may find your animal with this device if your Nock was fortunate enough to stay in? Yeah, but I'm going to put it in the 1% category because it's just not designed to do that. It's designed to operate like your normal arrow Nock, except you have the ability to find it. So if you're a pro at getting Nocks to stay in animals after you've shot them, you're doing something that I have no idea how in the world you're doing it.
Good luck, though. I mean, that's either it's a pass through or it trails for a little while, then gets knocked out.
And breaks off.
Right.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
So how does it work as far as you put the Nock on your arrow like you would any supplement Nock?
Yeah, you do. Yeah, just like your typical lighted Nock now.
Okay.
You just they're all custom molded and fitted to fit. Right now we have the 3 most popular sizes of Nocks. We're really, really close to being able to offer our X Nock for pre-sale as well. There's kind of a line there that we know that we have enough confidence to say, okay, we feel like this is close enough, and we know that it's going to be able to go to market, and that we're happy and comfortable with consumer consumption before we would offer something for pre-sale. So we're that close with the X Nock. And then our crossbow bolt Nocks, we're really close. That's the 2 biggest questions we get right now. Where's your X Nock and where's your crossbow? I can't believe how many crossbow hunters are out there. I mean, I knew, but man, there's a lot.
There are a lot. What about the technology itself? Like if you're trying to interact and find the Nock, how does that work with your phone? And how sensitive is it left to right? Or is it just you're close and then you have to figure that out?
Yeah, so basically it'll give you about 100 yards, up to 100 yards, depending on terrain or, interference or things like that. Closer is obviously always better. Here's what I say. Typically from an arrow standpoint, if we've just shot and we've missed, which like I go back and say is the 95%, you have a really good idea where that arrow's at within probably 10, 15, 20 yards. That's never going to be a problem. But once the arrow is fired, the accelerometer inside of the Nock turns on the light. And so it operates from that point in the time it leaves your bowstring as a traditional lighted Nock. Shortly thereafter, it also begins to emit a Bluetooth signal that once you open the app on your phone, which the app's free, once you get the Nock instructions there, you just go to the App Store and download the Breadcrumb app and sync your Nock. Super easy to do. Once you open the app, it begins to look for that device and they begin to talk to one another. Once they sync up, it gives you basically a hot or cold, and you have the option to activate a light, which you can make it flash on and off, or you have the option to be able to activate sound to make it beep at you. Yeah, and one of the coolest things about it is it also has a search party function. So let's say me, you, and 3 or 4 other buddies are in hunting camp together, and you just shot the buck of a lifetime. You come back to me and you're like, hey, Brandon, like I just shot this incredible deer, and my penetration wasn't that great, and I watched him run off with the arrow in him. I don't know how far he went, but I didn't want to push him, and I want to let it set for a few hours. So you can come back to camp, and then you can share that Nock with everyone in the camp. And now everybody that has the app has access to your Nock, and we can go out as a party, 4, 5, 6, 7 people, and try to locate your arrow. And with that many people, there's a really better than average chance we're probably going to find it. And once we find it, then you know what comes next. You know, we're either really close to blood trailing an animal, or or maybe not, unfortunately. But you know what? You get the picture.
Right. Yep. It's very. I mean, it's one of those things like, why didn't I think of that kind of thing? It's fantastic.
I think a lot of people did. I mean, I really, let me tell you, I think a lot of people did. I think a lot of people were smart enough to think about it. But let me just tell all those people, it was a hell of a lot more expensive than you thought it was to get it this far. It was. I'm not even going to ask
the question because I don't want to know. But the number I have in my head, knowing what I know about technology and how much it takes to bring a tech-based product to market is astounding. So congratulations on getting here. It's amazing that you were able to get here because most people don't get to this point.
Well, thank you for that. And before we wrap up, though, the one thing, and I necessarily don't want to turn your podcast into a product pitch, but kind of like I told about the book, about Eberhardt's book, the other product that we have that right now, the Nock has kind of the love appeal, for lack of better terms. That's the one that everybody's going crazy about. It's viral on the internet. But they're overlooking the big brother, and the big brother to that product is the location marker. So we worked with a team that had a very successful Bluetooth technology company already functioning. We created the first of its kind real long-range Bluetooth tracker. It has 2 AAA batteries, works for, we say up to 100 yards. I know from testing it's farther than that, but just to be safe because of interference and whatnot, we're comfortable to say up to 150 yards. But this thing has 5 super bright LEDs in it and a very loud audible beep. But to go on your backpack, your fishing pack, your deer stand, your ground blind, your whatever, and that goes back to, like I was saying about Eberhardt's book, you want to walk into your deer stand 2 hours before, but you're kind of sure you know where it's at, and you do know where it's at in the daytime, but at 4 a.m., it's a different ball game. You go stumbling around in the dark, and then, you can press a button on your phone when you get within inside of 150 yards, press a button, make it flash at you one time, and show you exactly where it's at. And for your backpack, if you're a Western hunter like I am, and even a spot and stalk deer hunter, you're walking around with a backpack on, and you get in that closing distance, and you need to sneak up to the edge of that field, or you need to close that extra 100 yards without making extra noise, weight, brush rubbing against your pack, whatever. I never take my pack off because I'm always scared I'm going to lose it, because when I try to come back to it, it's now camouflaged and blended in. It's like I hid my pack from myself. Now with this thing, you can do that. You can come back successfully to your pack, and for what they cost, my pack sometimes has $3,000 and $4,000 worth of gear in it. There's just no sense in not having one, linked to your backpack. So the location marker is as cool of a product as, and it truly is kind of a must-have. I mean, it's the Nock is fun and jazzy, and everybody loves to talk about it because it is a really cool product and it's going to help archers. But if you want something that's going to help everybody, the location marker is the thing.
Right. I'm fascinated by both your products.
You know, we're a super group of good guys that have great ethics. And, you know, for people out there that, you know, we've got a few of the negative comments. You're teaching kids not to track and blah, you know, I'm like, we're not doing that. Like, that's not our intent. Our intent is to help you not lose another arrow. And we don't want this to be an animal tracker. And we really hope and pray that people don't use it that way, because that's just not an ethical way to think. But, you know, like I've talked to a few people about it that are really close to me, and they're like, look, you got to kind of shed water in the sense of people that are going to take unethical shots are going to take unethical shots regardless of what you give them.
Right.
You know?
Right.
So.
Gotcha.
Yeah, we're excited.
I'm very excited for you. And I hope you just absolutely go gangbusters with this product. If the virility of the video is an indicator of what the sales will be like, it should be a good thing.
I hope you're right.
Yeah.
Because we got a lot of money to make up.
I'm sure you do. So let's, Brandon, before we got talking, I asked you to think of a memorable deer hunt.
Oh, yeah. I thought you were going to give me the 10 rapid fire questions.
We're getting there.
Okay. So memorable deer hunt. My most memorable deer hunt really was kind of the one that solidified me as a deer hunter, which I know it's easy for everybody to talk about their first deer, but I'll try to make this as quick as I can. Man, I didn't. I was 12 years old, November 23rd, 1992.
Wow.
Okay. I did not want to. In fact, I'm sorry, I was 13. I did not want to get out of bed that morning. The sun had already came up. I had slept in a little bit late. It was probably 7:15 when my cousin was supposed to go to this specific spot, but my cousin, female young lady, she slept in. Her mom, my aunt, who was also an avid hunter, came to my bedroom and woke up and said, "Your cousin's not going to that deer stand. I'm going. I'm leaving right now. You got 5 minutes to get ready." And I'm like, and she's kind of a bulldog anyway. So I was grouchy about it. Got up, finally threw my clothes on. I'm like, I'm wasting my time. Sun's already up. There's just no way this is going to work. So anyway, we're both late getting to our deer stands, and I'm sitting there about 9:30 in the morning. And by the way, like I said, I had never killed a deer. I hadn't killed one yet, and I was beginning to think that I was cursed because everybody in my family had killed a deer at this point. I'm 13, for crying out loud, and I'm a teenage boy. So anyway, I'm sitting in the stand. I'm playing with sticks. I'm bored out of my mind. It's 9:30 in the morning, and I'm like, just come get me already. I'm like, let's go eat breakfast. I'm ready to go. This doe comes squirting past me and kind of moving out there pretty fast, and I don't know what I was doing with my scope because I had somehow managed to turn it up to like 9, and this doe's like 35, 40 yards from me.
Right.
So I just kind of throw my scope up to look at her, and I see something move behind me, and here's this buck that's chasing her, and he's not just any buck. Like, he's the buck. I mean, he's 26 inches wide, straight typical 10, 6-inch bases. I mean, he's a typical, he's your Glendale with a super wide spread, 165-inch whitetail. And at this time in Oklahoma, really unheard of. You just didn't see many deer like that. And this deer comes up and gets out there, and he's 35, 40 yards. But my scope is turned up on full power, so all I can see is hair. And I'm so freaked out that I just kind of start unloading bullets. Like, I wish I had a less graphic way to say it, but I did. I wound up shooting 7 times, hitting the deer 5. There was no chance he was ever going to go anywhere. But I was like so freaked out and excited and insane that, yeah, that's what happened. That was my very first deer, but it was this incredible, very mature 6.5-year-old whitetail that kind of lives in legend where I'm from when I was a 13-year-old kid.
Wow.
So point of the story is just go, because sometimes, sometimes we think ourselves to death. You know what I mean? Sometimes we think that it's like, I didn't get there early enough, or I didn't do this, or, And I know I'm the one talking about don't hunt if the wind's wrong. And now here I am 30 minutes later saying, just go, just get out, because you just don't know. I don't know where the wind was blowing that morning. It was the rut, though. Nothing mattered. You know what I mean?
Right. The rut is a whole different ballgame.
Yeah. So anyway, that was my deer story.
Great story, man. Fantastic. I love it. Very good. Let's transition over to the 10 rapid fire questions.
Okay.
All right. I didn't prep you for these. And
nope, I have no idea. I really am nervous, actually. I have
perfect.
No idea
that's exactly the attitude we like to, an emotion we like to get out of these just before we start. Excellent. All right. So what's your number one hunting tip of all time?
Hunt the wind.
Okay. We all have these items that we like to have with us when we go hunting, other than your weapon. And it drives us crazy if we don't have it with us. What's that one thing for you?
A moon phase watch.
That's a good one. We haven't had that answer before. That's very cool. All right. What's your biggest pet peeve in life?
Oh my gosh. Bad drivers.
Very common answer. Very common answer. All right. How old are you today, Brandon?
38.
38. What would you tell the 16-year-old Brandon Bates, knowing what you know today about life?
Invest in real estate.
Invest in real estate. Very interesting. Gotcha. All right. You meet a stranger at a hunting convention somewhere in the world. They come up to you and you have a conversation. They ask you what you do for a living. What do you tell them?
Oh, I tell them that I'm usually tell them I'm a sportscaster.
Okay. Gotcha. Very nice. What did you have for breakfast this morning?
I haven't had breakfast yet. 1 cup of coffee.
1 cup of coffee. All right. You can have your own billboard on the side of a highway. It's a blank canvas. You can start from scratch. What would you put on it?
Oh my gosh! I could have my own billboard on the same. Oh man, probably something. Probably something Christian. I would say. I just don't know what that would be. But I mean, I would probably, something along the lines of. I think I know what I would say. I would probably put on there that every day is not about you.
That's an excellent one. I like that a lot. Very nice. All right. If I say the word successful to you, who's the first person that pops into your head and why?
Oh my gosh. I don't have no idea. When you said it and then started thinking like Warren Buffett, like, I mean, and I don't even like him, but
that's
you
the first,
said it and like, and
person.
all I could see was that, that was the first image that came to my head was, but I just, but the problem is like, I don't think that's fair because that just proves like how shallow we are because now it just proves how shallow we are as people, excuse me, or at least me, because like you think, and I see this overweight, super old rich guy as a picture of success just because he has more money than a lot of countries.
Well, I guarantee you after the show is over, you'll go back and you'll rethink your most successful person, and then you'll probably start putting some more thought into that, won't you?
Without a doubt, yes.
I certainly have, since I've asked these questions, like, well, who do I consider successful? And it's not the answer that initially popped into my head anymore.
Yeah. I have lots of answers. I have lots of answers of people that I view as successful, he's the most wealthy person. I don't know. That's a terrible answer, but anyway, we did it.
Right.
That's what it is.
But you answered the question.
Yeah.
Exactly. All right. What's a day in your life look like these days? I mean, it must be crazy.
Oh man, a day in my life right now looks like lots of emails, lots of Facebook messages, lots of looking at plane tickets, getting ready to travel, reviewing television shows, doing voiceover work. I mean, it's, having a wife and 2 kids, and I enjoy the most things. Like yesterday, I went grocery shopping, and for that hour and a half, like I really, really enjoyed it because all I thought about was grocery shopping.
Sorry, I can appreciate your answer. I understand.
Yeah.
That makes so much sense to me. All right. And then finally, what's a deer hunting day in your life look like? I assume it's different than the typical day.
Deer hunting day for me now, I don't take it so serious. I joke and I say, well, I'm not as mad at them as I was whenever I was in high school, and I wasn't mad at them then. It's just the right. Example. Right. But man, deer hunting day for me is when I get to deer hunt, that's a day that I should be, that's relaxed time. That's time sitting in a deer stand, just thinking about something. And sometimes I may be in a deer stand for 4 or 5 hours and never see anything. And
not even realize that, you know what I mean? Because my brain was just running, or I was thinking, and I didn't have to be running my mouth. You know what I mean? I wasn't talking to someone. So deer hunting day to me is a relaxing experience now.
Very nice. I love it. Very, very cool. All right. Those are the 10, man. You did a good job. All right. So where can we find more information about you, your products, the things that are coming out? If the people are listening to the show and they want more, where can we go?
Well, breadcrumbtech.com is where you can find out about the products. I mean, I'm pretty boring, but you find out more about me on the Elk Network, RMEF.org, and you can direct there to the Elk Network as well, which is, we have all of our seasons of Team Elk up, and just a lot of really great things happening there. And if you're interested in the elk hunting and Western big game hunting, so I would certainly direct you to the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation page. Passionate organization, or I should say organization, that they are passionate, but I'm super passionate about them and about their mission and their conservation mission and what they really do for wildlife and all wildlife. I genuinely don't think there's a better organization out there. So more info about me will lead you to find more info about them, and that to me is what's really important. But the product, breadcrumbtech.com, we have a list of videos there. We have our products, like I said, they're 40% off right now, just for early adopters in this pre-sale format that we're working with. And then very soon they're going to go to 25% off. But now's a good time to jump in there and pick those up. And we have a lot of other really cool products coming with them as well. So I'll keep you in suspense. We'll talk about them again when they show up. But we have some other cool products as well that are right around the corner. So yeah.
Very cool. Very, very cool. Excellent, Brandon. This has been an honor and a pleasure to have you on the show. I like talking deep conservation ideas with you, and the product is it's a game changer. And I think as I had mentioned, I think it's going to be a viral product, and I wish you the most success with that you can possibly have. It seems very innovative.
Well, I really appreciate it, and we worked hard on it to try and make it perfect for the consumer, and we'll continue to over-engineer and make it better and better and better. So we're just excited to get it in people's hands so it can start helping them. And we can't wait for the feedback. So yeah, so thanks for having me, man. This has been awesome. I'm really, really excited. I can't believe there's like people that Shane Mahoney, Eberhard, those guys like that I really look up to. I've been on your show, and now I've been on here. It's super cool.
Well, thank you to Brandon Bates for joining us on the Big Buck Registry Deer Hunting Podcast. It was quite an interesting story. He's very mild-mannered, but the story itself is very interesting. And to think that you can actually bring a product to market in the way he did, I know it takes a lot of time and effort and money and patience, and he was able to put all that together. And to find out, we reached out to him simply because we saw the video, but we learned that Brandon's a really interesting guy. He certainly has an interesting background in the PBR and the professional bull riders arena announcer job, and it was fascinating to learn he's even got a TV show on the Outdoor Channel. We didn't know this, but that's kind of how Brandon does it. He's just kind of out of the spotlight, but likes to produce some really good stuff. So, Dusty, do we have a Chubby Tines tip of the week this week?
Yeah, we do, Jay.
The Chubby Tines tip of the week is sponsored by Morse's Sporting Goods. Firearms, used bows, used bows, located at 85 Kentucky Falls Road in Hillsborough, New Hampshire. Give Jim a call at 603-464-3444, morsessportinggoods.com. Your dollars go further in New Hampshire. There's no sales tax. Morse's Sporting Goods.
Thinking about hunting season coming up, and a lot of guys park where they can see their truck from their tree stand, and if you're doing that, you know that your deer can see your truck from your tree stand also, whether out in the woods or in the field. You might want to reconsider that, because the deer pick up on when your vehicle is parked in that particular area. And what's that mean when you park there? That means you're in your tree stand. And I don't know how smart the deer are, but just past experiences on my end, if they can see your truck, they're not going to come by your tree stand.
That's true. Although sometimes when I'm out on one side of the property, all the deer are standing next to my truck.
Yeah, that could happen also. But Most of the time, Jay.
I know. Most of the time, if you should at least
If you notify them you're there, they're going to bypass where you're going to.
Yeah. I mean, deer are smart. They'll pick up on your patterns. And if you go with your truck and park in that same spot every time, guess what? They're going to figure out that you're coming in shortly after that truck pulls up.
That's right.
And that's just the way it is. So you got to outthink them. Well, that's great, man. Thanks for that tip of the week. That was fantastic. Thank you to Morse's Sporting Goods for sponsoring the Chubby Tines Tip of the Week. I'd also like to say thank you to all of our sponsors. Without them, this show is not possible. And specifically, I'd like to say thank you to Advanced Takedown Tree Stands, Covert Scouting Cameras, the Horny Buck Seed Company, and once again, Morse's Sporting Goods. I truly believe in each and every product that we're advertising on this show. We've tried them all. We've been to the stores. Each and every one are absolutely high quality, high grade products. And if you're shopping for any one of these types of items, please give our sponsors a shot first. Dusty, where can we find you when you're not hanging out here in the studios with me?
Shoot me an email, dusty@bigbuckregistry.com. You can look me up on Instagram and Twitter @ChasingAntler, Facebook.com/Chubby Tines Outdoors. Jay, where can the people reach out to you? Or you're not on the mic?
Likewise, you can shoot me an email, jay@bigbuckregistry.com, and you can visit us on Facebook, facebook.com/bigbuckregistry. We're also on Twitter, which is twitter.com/bigbuckregistry. We're also on Instagram, instagram.com/bigbuckregistry, and YouTube, which is youtube.com/bigbuckregistry. On YouTube, you can listen to all of our podcasts in their entirety. As far as videos are concerned, it's a boring video, but the audio content is there, so you can actually listen to our podcast. You can also listen to all of our live shows that we've done on Thursday nights when we do them, and we've gone back and re-interviewed a lot of our previous guests we had on the show just to put a face to a voice, let's put it that way. You can always listen to our show on other places as well, not just YouTube. We're found on iTunes, iHeartRadio, TuneIn Radio, Stitcher, and Blueberry. And if you would like to submit a buck to our page for consideration and be featured on our page in front of 250,000 diehard deer hunting fans, all you have to do is go to bigbuckregistry.com/mybuck, and all of the instructions will be right there. I think that's pretty much everywhere we're at. I think that's a wrap, Dusty.
That's a whole lot of big buck, Jay.
Sure is. I'm Jay Scott.
I'm Dusty Phillips.
And this is the Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast. We'll see you next week.
Can't wait.